Chapter 1. Email to your brain. Language in an online and mobile world. On a warm Texas afternoon, a young boy walked lazily down the middle of a dirt road. On either side, barbed wire fenced off fields for crops or cattle. Suddenly, a roar came out of nowhere, dust clouds swirled, and a black chimera lurched straight toward him. Terrified, the boy dived for the side of the road, cutting himself badly on the barbed wire. The year was about 1905. The youth had just seen his first automobile. The story was recounted to me by Billy Fullingham, a colleague at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, where I was a visiting professor in the mid-1980s. The young man was her father. Fast forward to the early 21st century and another Billy, this time, the Reverend Billy Graham. The occasion was one of the last of Graham's legendary revivals. Always a man to reach out to his listeners, to speak in words that would resonate, Graham proclaimed, "Conscience is the email God sends to your brain." These two incidents, though separated in time, illustrate our very human reactions to technology. When technology is new, as in the case of the automobile, bewilderment, even fear, is a natural response. When a technology has become embedded in our everyday practices, as with email, a metaphor such as email to your brain is understood effortlessly. Roger Silverstone and Leslie Hatton have used the term domestication to describe the process whereby a new device, such as a car, a vacuum cleaner, or a mobile phone, becomes a normal component of daily living. Take another example of domestication of a technology, flying on an airplane. In the early decades of commercial flights, traveling by plane was a formal event. People dressed for the occasion, gloves and hats for ladies, suits for gentlemen, shine shoes for all. Today, however, flying is thoroughly domesticated. Unless they are heading directly to a business meeting, passengers may well wear jeans or even sweatpants, making themselves comfortable for the long haul ahead. Since this book is about communication technologies, our question regarding domestication is this: how does our language evolve, along with changes in the way we interact with other people, as communication technologies become increasingly domesticated? Of course, domestication is not an all-or-none proposition. 10 years ago, many Americans were daily users of instant messaging, but much of the rest of the country had not heard of IM. Those innocent of one language tool might have domesticated a different medium. You are an IM devotee, while I relentlessly check email. You live by your BlackBerry, while I am inseparable from my mobile phone. Our cumulative experience with communication technologies has gradually altered behavioral and social norms. It is easier to find the weather forecast online than to tune into the Weather Channel on television and await the local report. Email or a phone call, sometimes resulting in a voicemail, replaces walking from our office to the one next door to ask a question or deliver a message. As domestication of communication technologies spreads through the populace, people are increasingly on networks that extend beyond the landline phone. We commonly speak of universal access to landline telephones in developed parts of the world. Literally, of course, not everyone who might want a telephone has one. But at least in the United States, the proportions are large enough that for the sake of discussion we can speak of everyone having landline access, if not to his or her own phone, then to someone else's. Universal access to newer communication technologies using computers or mobile phones has not yet arrived, but is showing impressive growth in most parts of the globe. Among those people who are on modern communication technologies, an increasing number are always on. Again, always, like universal, is a generalization, but one that makes sense here. Not everyone drives a car or flies on airplanes, but essentially we're all familiar with the technologies. Just so, Billy Graham knew that even those among his audience who themselves did not use email were aware of the medium, rendering his metaphor comprehensible. How has the growing domestication of email, IM, text messaging on mobile phones, blogging, Facebook, and the rash of other forms of online and mobile communication platforms, altered our communication landscape? Some of the effects are obvious. Once you have the requisite equipment, a computer, a mobile phone, and have managed the access fees, it's far simpler and less expensive to communicate with people not physically present than at any time in human history. A second palpable change is the ease with which each of us can become an author or publisher. Whether with blogs, web pages, or emailing files to distribution lists, we can bypass the traditional textual gatekeepers, editors of all ilk, newspaper, periodical, book and, sometimes, legal authorities. What is more, these new technologies potentially compromise our privacy and even our individual safety. On the annoying but comparatively innocuous end of the spectrum, we sometimes hit send on an email before we have finished, or edited what we meant to say. We accidentally forward messages to the wrong people or intentionally forward missives we received as private communique. Much more dangerously, online financial predators ask for social security numbers or banking information, and lonely teenagers are victimized by online friends. Other consequences of these electronic language media are less certain. For years, the popular press has been asking whether email, IM, or texting on mobile phones is degrading the way we write. Conversely, some linguists and composition teachers argue that all this writing is bringing about an epistolary renaissance that is strengthening our language abilities, and the language itself. Similarly, there is considerable disagreement over the social consequences of doing so much communicating at a distance rather than face-to-face. Beyond the obvious, and the contended, effects of new language technologies, there are, I suggest, two fundamental changes that email and its descendants are having upon our language and the way we use it. These two transformations are at once subtle and potentially invidious, challenging our assumptions about interpersonal communication and calling for us to rethink conventional notions about spoken and written language.